Vicky's girlfriend Connie first told her about the place, a beautiful, sprawling horse ranch nestled in the scrub hills above Northridge. As they slammed their school lockers shut that day, Vicky thought, this has to have something to do with boys. And then, sure enough, there are a couple of really hot guys that ride there, said Connie. But she also warned that a bunch of weird hippies had recently moved onto the property. Vicky just thought, so what else was new? It was 1969. Besides, she liked the idea of maybe meeting a wild hippie boy. It beat cruising the malls with Connie and endlessly flirting with the same stuck-up jocks from their school. That next Saturday, she borrowed her father's country squire wagon, winding up the narrow curling roads off the 405. Connie told her the ranch had once been a set for movies and TV shows, Bonanza and The Lone Ranger. She said there was an old man who owned and ran the place, but that the hippies had apparently moved in and taken over when he'd gotten too infirm to handle things on his own. She edged the squire through the rutted dirt lot, a plume of dust rising skyward. Peasant-bloused teen girls milled aimlessly about. They reminded Connie of the stoners at her school, and then there were a few young men in jeans and tight T-shirts, one of them definitely hot. A man about her father's age walked purposefully by, in worn jeans with long scraggly hair and an unkempt beard. As she slowed the car, he glanced back, a look you gave when you knew someone, or wanted to. Instinctively, Vicky turned away. She parked alongside a ramshackle barn, a weathered wooden sign out front reading, Office. It was cool and dark inside, the heat of the day and the drone of the cicadas like dreams kept at bay. An old man at the counter turned as she entered, but his eyes seemed oddly vacant, staring out into the distance. He asked what she was there for. I wanted to rent a horse and to ride, she said. Oh, okay, he nodded slowly, as if that wasn't the only possible answer. His mottled hands probed at the countertop, finally finding an old-bound ledger and then sliding it toward him. He offered Vicky a pen, his hand shaking and unsteady, telling her to enter her address and license number. Then he took payment for a 2-hour ride, stuffing the bills in his oily pant pocket. One of the peasant-bloused girls entered just then and glanced knowingly at the old man. Without asking, the girl grabbed a can of beer from a small humming refrigerator, cracked it open, then headed back out, cocking a jeaned hip at him before blowing a parting cheesecake kiss. But the old man seemed not to notice, his eyes forever distant. Vicky picked out a saddle and bridle from a row of worn metal hooks lining the side wall. Then the young man she'd seen outside led her to the stables, hauling her gear effortlessly over his broad shoulders. He was barely older than Vicky, with a coltish stride and eyes that seemed kind and somehow knowing. She was glad now that she hadn't come with Connie, who prided herself on stealing boys. The young man's legs were so long, it was hard for Vicky to keep up, but then he glanced back and slowed, asking her name, and with cute dimples when he smiled. Rounding the corner, they passed the man with the dark beard, his gaze on her once more. The young man had been telling Connie all about his favorite trails, but he stopped in mid-sentence. She selected a brown mare, and the boy saddled it for her. Standing close by, he unfolded a ranch map, continuing with his favorite trails and reminding her she had a 2-hour rental. Cinching the saddle one last time, he inadvertently brushed up against Vicky's hip, smiling shyly. There were those dimples again. As she trotted away, Vicky glanced back. It was a beautiful L.A. day, the sky cloudless and almost painfully blue. The ranch was everything Connie had promised, majestic winding trails and enormous rock formations like ancient stone sentinels. A hawk drifted lazily overhead before finally descending down a long, narrow ravine. The meditative drone of the cicadas seemed to come from all directions at once. Vicky gazed out at the rolling brown hills, past a wiry scrub oak. In the distance, she caught a vista of the San Fernando Valley below and tried to spot her neighborhood. She had told her father she'd be at the mall all day with Connie. She knew he wouldn't like her young ranch hand, but she did. Checking her watch, Vicky suddenly realized the rental time was nearly up. It was already well into the heat of the day, so she made sure to cool the mare down on the long ride back, taking one of the more level trails and then walking the last half mile. Descending the final switchback before the ranch below, she checked her purse for a pen and paper in case she saw the boy again. But he was nowhere to be found, the stables deserted. She tied the horse at the worn posts outside the office barn. Scanning the cool, dark interior, her eyes slowly adjusting, she spotted a man in the shadows at a far corner. He was mid-20s, a wiry red mustache, and eyes that felt hard and somehow calculating. Vicky told him her horse was outside and that she had already paid. He opened the ledger, running his finger down the day's entries. "I don't show any payment," he said in a Texas drawl. "Well, I did," she said. Without responding, he went out to check the horse and then returned a moment later. "You didn't cool her down," he said. "Now one of us is going to have to do it for you. There's a $15 fee for that." Vicky said she'd been riding for years and had indeed cooled the horse down. The man just stared back. "I already paid for the ride, and I'm not going to pay more for something I didn't even do," she blurted out. But her words felt foolish, childish. Wanting to take charge, she grabbed her purse, heading out into the blinding light. The man started after, soon followed by several of the girls. The cicadas whispered in unison, coming at her from all sides now. Walking faster, Vicky fumbled with her keys, frantically unlocking the car door, getting in, relocking it from inside, and then turning the ignition. But the engine merely groaned in the sweltering heat. The man and the girls soon surrounded the car and then began violently rocking it from side to side. It was as if they had wordlessly become some synchronized machine working towards some unknown task. Vicky stared out at the haunted faces surrounding her. She considered bolting and running, but to where? She'd left the passenger window half rolled down during her ride to keep the car cooler inside. One of the girls suddenly reached in, grabbed her purse from the seat, and then tore away with it. "Stop! Stop!" Vicky screamed, tears welling in her eyes. The car continued to rock, ever more violently. Real tears began to flow now. But then suddenly, her young man was there alongside the car, the purse in his hand. He motioned for Vicky to roll the window back down, urging her on with his eyes. Cautiously she obeyed, as if having received a mental communication. The others stepped back. The rocking ceased. "Here's your purse," he said gently, handing it in to her. His eyes were kind, but urgent now. He leaned in closer. "Don't ever come back here," he whispered. She nodded blankly, set the purse on the seat beside her, finally managed to get the car going, and then slowly pulled away. Still shaking, Vicky glanced in the rearview mirror. Inexplicably, the others began to wander off, but through a rising plume of dust she saw the young man still watching her, his face impossible to read. Vicky and Connie went to the mall that next weekend, the same boring boys and Connie doing what she always did. Vicky hadn't told anyone about the ranch, not even Connie. She wanted to see the boy again, maybe to thank him, but she didn't dare go back. She'd had a dream about him the other night, where they did things to one another. He knew her now in ways that no one ever had. A few weeks later, she was watching the evening TV news with her father. A report came on describing how a band of hippies had invaded a hillside home, brutally murdering several Hollywood stars. The camera footage suddenly cut to an aerial shot of a horse ranch in the San Fernando foothills, and then mugshots of the hippies. Staring at the faces on the flickering TV screen, Vicky recognized every one, and there at the center, the young man who had saddled her horse, his eyes boring down into her. Vicky's father glanced over, catching her expression. "I'm sorry, Princess. My God, what a world." He grabbed the TV remote, but the story was on nearly every channel. He finally landed on Gilligan's Island. Gilligan and the skipper were at it again. "There, that's better," her father said, looking over and then patting her on the knee. But Vicky just continued staring, no longer even seeing. She suddenly heard cicadas droning outside the open living room window. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" her father asked finally. "Was it that story?" She still said nothing. He paused. "You really haven't seemed yourself lately. Is anything wrong? Is it something at school?" But then his face brightened, and he turned to her. "I bet I know," he smiled. "Is it a boy?"